I love The Incredibles. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and Incredibles 2 was by no means bad, but it was a disappointment. And in a previous video, Rewriting the Screenslaver, I talked about how the messy villain could have been given a slightly different backstory that would have made more sense and set up some unique themes. But that wasn't the only problem I had with Incredibles 2. I believe the finale was severely underwhelming. The family has a few small fights on Winston Dever's hydrofoil, Everjust, and then stops it from crashing into the city. It isn't a terrible finale, but not only is the hydrofoil fight not as entertaining as the Omnidroid finale from Incredibles 1, it doesn't really work well in this movie. But I believe the third act of Incredibles 2 could have been something special. It could have taken some mechanisms that were set up earlier in the movie and used them to craft a finale that was more thematically satisfying, but also just more entertaining. So my small change, and I'll admit it's a big one, is this. The climax of Incredibles 2 should have taken place in Municiberg. I cannot, for the life of me, figure out why Incredibles 2 ends on a hydrofoil. The hydrofoil isn't an interesting place for the climax. It doesn't lend itself to new and exciting action sequences or hold any thematic significance. If anything, it makes the action sequences worse. Every fight needs to take place in a corridor or a small room because it's a hydrofoil. There isn't any open area, which means characters whose superpowers involve flying and running and teleporting are forced to fight using those powers in a hallway. The setting puts unnecessary constraints on the action. And the weird thing is, considering the setup to the climax, our characters don't really have any good reason to be on the hydrofoil. Like, why are they even there? You mean to tell me that the signing ceremony for an international law legalizing supers being attended by multiple ambassadors takes place on some random billionaire's boat? Wouldn't there be a better place for something like that? Like whatever the Incrediverse version of the UN is? Don't the ambassadors need security, or do they always just do their signing ceremonies at the home of whoever volunteers? Like a couple's game night. I don't like the hydrofoil. It doesn't work, so I'm getting rid of it. The signing ceremony is just at the UN. Why not? It makes sense. The UN, or whatever it would be called, but for now let's just call it the UN, would probably have hallways and small rooms as well as a large assembly room that would lend itself to more cinematic fights. And, real important, if something started happening elsewhere in the city, our characters could easily leave the UN and go to wherever that is happening. They aren't trapped on a boat. So, Evelyn captures Helen and is revealed to be the Screenslaver. We get that big speech, which I covered in my first Incredibles 2 video, Rewriting the Screenslaver, which if you haven't seen, I would really recommend watching. Basically, Evelyn doesn't really care about superheroes. She's laser focused on making people fearful of screens because she believes TV corrupts people's minds. Evelyn tells Helen her backstory, and then she explains most of the plan. Are you going to kill me? Nah, you're actually way more useful alive. You see, people believe in you. They trust that the supers can protect them from the big scary Screenslaver. So I'm gonna use you to show them that even the supers are vulnerable. There is no one whose screens can't corrupt. And once people see for themselves the damage screens can do, they won't just be afraid of screens. Screens will be outlawed forever. So Evelyn calls Bob. Bob goes to save Helen and sends Lucius to watch the kids, but this time, no brainwashed supers show up. Lucius and the kids just stay at home and watch the ceremony on TV. And wouldn't you know it, at the ceremony, sitting in the front row are Bob and Helen in costume. It looks like it was just a false alarm and Mom and Dad had to rush to the ceremony so they didn't have time to call. Makes enough sense. But then Jack starts crying. Something on TV is upsetting him, and it has something to do with Mom and Dad. Violet notices that Mom and Dad are wearing new masks, bigger ones, and then it dawns on everyone, something isn't right. Mom and Dad might be in trouble. Lucius decides to go down to the UN and tells the kids to stay home, but Violet and Dash insist that they come. Lucius thinks it's too dangerous, and besides, who's gonna watch Jack? And then they come up with the obvious answer, Edna. In Incredibles 2, the kids don't go to Edna for help because they're worried that whoever's after them will now look for the kids at Edna's place. And as fun as it would be to set an action sequence in Edna's mansion, hey Brad Bird, there's definitely going to be a third one of these. Set an action sequence in Edna's mansion. She has a flamethrower room. But anyway, as much fun as that would be, in this version, no one's looking for the kids or Lucius, so Edna's is a safe place to go. And you might be like, but Jack was a fun part of the Incredibles 2 finale. But like, was he? I think forcing Jack onto the boat really hurt the finale because the writers were forced to do one of two things. Either Jack was smart enough to not cause a big ruckus and get the kids caught, which wouldn't work, or Jack does misbehave, but that doesn't get the kids caught for some reason. And in the case of Incredibles 2, the reason they aren't caught is that Jack just happens to stop all of the brainwashed supers by accident with random powers, some we didn't even know he had. And that is an incredibly unsatisfying way to beat the villain. Jack being part of the finale is also super distracting. The kids need to save their parents, but whoopsie, the baby's running around, so they need to catch him too. It isn't really fun, it just feels like another pointless detour on the way to the actual climax. And Jack also ruins what would have been the most interesting part of the finale. Dash and Violet chase Jack into the bridge that just happens to be where the mind-controlled Bob, Helen, and Lucius are. We have this setup for a very interesting fight. Mind-controlled adults versus their kids. The adults want to kill the kids, and the kids want to save the adults. It would have been legitimately tense. But instead, before any of that happens, Jack floats over to Helen and uses telekinesis to take Helen's glasses off. Helen is freed from Evelyn's mind control and then is able to take the glasses off Lucius and Bob in a few seconds. Cool fight, gone. So Jack stays with Edna. Lucius and the kids explain what's happening and then leave for the UN. Maybe Edna also gives the team new suits, why not? Maybe they all have different designs too. Disney loves to sell toys. So Edna takes Jack, sends the family on their way, and then starts rummaging through the diaper bag the kids left with Edna. And then she pulls out the remote. Edna smiles. Jack smiles. Cut to the UN. Winston gives a speech and the ambassador starts signing the document, but before the last ambassador signs, Helen catches her hand and takes her pen. Then we get the speech. I'm not too married to anything specific, something along the lines of, you thought you were safe, you thought the supers could protect you, but they can't. No one is immune to my control, and now I'll show you how much damage screens can do. And then the supers turn on the ambassadors, and as some of them try to escape, the rest of the new supers portal in and block the doors. Void makes a portal under Winston and teleports him out of the room, and then the new supers back the ambassadors into a corner. All is lost. Reflux gets ready to burp up some lava. Helixtrix charges up some electricity. They attack, and when the smoke clears, we see that the ambassadors are protected by a force field. The force field drops, and behind the new supers, we see Lucius, Dash, and Violet. Evelyn gets excited. Frozone. Once she gets him, there won't be any other supers to stop her. Lucius tells the kids that he'll take care of the new supers while the kids try to stop their parents. He thinks that they may be able to break the parents' hypnosis somehow. So they split up, and we get 3 really fun fights. Lucius is a pro, so he's able to take on all the new supers at once, a lot like he does at the house in the original Incredibles 2. And while that's going on, the kids are fighting their parents. We get to have that fight that I was really looking forward to, but is upended by Convenience Baby. It will be insanely tense. Yeah, we know no one's dying in this fight, but if the parents even manage to land a hit on the kids, this could be incredibly traumatic for both of them. It could have real consequences in the future. So the kids fight the adults. They split up. Dash takes Helen. He tries to run at her and grab the glasses, but Helen's able to grow her legs real tall like Stiltman and avoid him. And as she's attacking him, Dash realizes that he can get Helen to twist or stretch legs around each other and immobilize herself. This works. She falls over, allowing Dash to get the glasses off of Helen. Violet pairs up against Bob. This makes a little bit of sense since her shield seems to be nearly as strong as Bob. I don't really have many specifics for this fight. Comment with your thoughts on the fight or tweet me at NandoVMovies. I'm legitimately interested in how a fight between those two would play out and why Violet would win. So the kids free the parents, big happy reunion, hugs, kisses. Helen explains that Evelyn's behind everything and they need to protect the ambassadors. They check on Lucius. It looks like he has most of the new supers frozen. Bob asks, how's it going over there? And Lucius replies, it's good. Bob says, oh no. Helen asks, what's wrong? And Bob says, he would have said cool. Then Lucius turns around to reveal that he has also been hit with the brainwashing goggles by the only unfrozen super, Void. Void starts working on freeing the other 5 frozen supers, which means this next fight is all 4 Incredibles versus a mind-controlled Frozone, which is a big problem. See, Frozone doesn't get enough credit, but I would argue that he's the most dangerous living super in the Incrediverse, and specifically poses an incredibly high amount of danger to the Incredibles. Think about it one by one. Mr. Incredible would probably do the best against Frozone since he's able to break out of Frozone's ice. But then when you start looking at the other family members, it gets a lot worse. Incredibles 2 demonstrates that Elastigirl is weakened by sub-zero temperatures. She's unable to stretch without breaking. Dash can't run on ground that's frozen. Violet's invisibility isn't that useful if there's snow in the air or on the ground since she makes tracks. Frozone is also the most mobile super behind Void, and only Violet has a power that works at long range. Basically, Frozone might as well have been designed to beat the Incredibles. So Lucius fights the family and does work. Even all 4 of them working together can't stop him. And Void is making progress breaking the rest of the new supers out. Bob and Helen try to protect Violet and Dash from Lucius, and then the other supers break free. This is the moment when a tied up Winston tries to convince Evelyn to free the supers supers from mind control. Tells her the story about their father. Evelyn is inspired by Bob and Helen being willing to sacrifice themselves to save their kids. And right before Lucius and the other new supers attack, Evelyn depowers the goggles and the supers are free. Then they all wake up and apologize to each other. Day saved. Well, not quite. Winston calls in over the loudspeaker. He asks if everyone's okay. They all say that they're fine. Helen asks if Winston knows where Evelyn is, and Winston tells them that he has her and it's all under control. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief. But then Winston says, and thank goodness, because you're never going to believe who's back. You see, I think Incredibles 2 was missing something big. An exciting, spectacular finale where everyone gets to do their thing that plays to everyone's strengths. I mean, we just made the audience that's going to be comprised mostly of children watch Frozone nearly kill the Incredibles. It's time for some dessert. And if only there were some other threat that the Incredibles could thwart. One last big fun action set piece that could tie everything in the movie up in a nice bow. One that was introduced in the first act of the movie but never revisited, who would hypothetically still be at large and planning another attack on the city. If only. So here we have the return of the Underminer. The movie is going to end where it began, only this time things are different because of lessons learned throughout the movie. On the Underminer side, I wanted to figure out what he's after. You see, Incredibles 1 sets up a very different Underminer than the one we meet in Incredibles 2. Incredibles 1 Underminer declares war on the surface world, and this seems to be his first attack. You would figure that this is going to be some kind of mission to destroy a landmark or kill someone. But in Incredibles 2, we learned that his plan was really just about robbing banks, which seems a little low stakes compared to war with the surface world. And trust me, I love a good bank robber villain, but this begs the question, what does a subterranean mole man need with cash? Like, what's he gonna do with it? And how does this factor into his war? And my answer is, he's creating an army of robots. The Underminer used the money to buy supplies to build a robot army which he plans to use to conquer the surface world. The Underminer seems to be a mechanical genius anyway, so he has a robot army. The Underminer is also piloting a large mech. It's kind of a cross between Emmett's mech from the Lego movie and the Devastator from Transformers. Not that one, the OGG1 one, but a little smaller. And we hear another big declaration from the Underminer. The time has come for your downfall and my uprising. And the robots terrify the people of Municiberg. They cause destruction, mess up a few cop cars. One is knocked in the air, is about to land on some people when it is caught. And we hear, not so fast, Underminer. Mr. Incredible, back for more? And then the Underminer fires a rocket at Mr. Incredible. He doesn't move. And when the smoke clears, we see Mr. Incredible protected by a bubble. I know, second time I've done this, but I don't care. It's cool and dramatic. The bubble lowers and Violet becomes visible next to her father. Then Dash runs in and Elastigirl swings over. Big hero shot. I must have hit you harder than I thought. Did you forget how this went last time? I didn't forget. I brought help. Then everyone else shows up in the street. Frozone skates in on an ice track with Electrics. Screech flies in carrying Reflux, and Void opens a portal and walks through with Brick and Crushhauer. They all stand together. Even bigger hero shot. Underminer screams, "Get them!" And then we have a big cool fight scene. It's everything that the Incredibles 2 finale was missing. The family is fighting together. Everyone gets a moment to show off by destroying a bunch of robots. That's why they do it in all the Avengers movies. The supers also help people that have been hurt or trapped by debris from explosions caused by the robots. Incredibles are teaming up with new supers. Powers that combo well together are being used together. It's awesome. And we can have a couple of fun little beats. Violet can be fighting robots and saving people, and it turns out that one of the people in the crowd that she saves is Tony. This catches Violet off guard. She doesn't really know what to do, so she does a silly Batman voice. "Look out, citizen. It's very dangerous out here, so, be careful because of the robots." It's awkward. And then she can catch Mom and Dad out of the corner of her eye. They're fighting robots, but also looking on all proud. Oh, it's her first save. I wish I had my camera. Dash runs by, does a kissy face. Violet chases after him. "As you were, citizen." Tony takes a look and just says, "Huh." Frozone and Reflux can get a little competitive, kind of like Legolas and Gimli. Their powers are essentially opposites and both lend themselves to fighting waves of drones. So they're each taking out tons of robots. And Winston is watching the action on the new super's body cams from back in the secret broadcast van where Evelyn was controlling everything. He notices that a lot of people are in danger, but the supers aren't able to save people and stop robots. So not everybody's getting saved. Winston also notices that the people aren't helping each other because they're too scared. Winston can say to himself, there aren't enough supers to save everyone. everyone. And then Evelyn can think for a second and say, maybe we don't need supers. Next shot, Mr. Incredible finds some people trapped behind some rubble. He tries to lift the rubble, but it's a little too heavy. He's tired and he just can't do it. And then Screech, the owl guy, hears in an earpiece, Screech, it's Winston. I need you to look at Mr. Incredible. What? Just do it. And Screech flies over towards Mr. Incredible. Then we cut back to Winston and Evelyn in the broadcast van. Evelyn is hacking something. Winston's looking at a bunch of monitors with the live feed from the supers' body cameras on them. He's watching Screech's, and on comes Mr. Incredible trying and failing to lift the rubble. Winston asks Evelyn, do you have it? Evelyn says, yep, we're live. And suddenly, all of the TVs in store windows and houses change to the feed from Screech's body camera. Winston tells Screech to sweep in and get a good look at Mr. Incredible. So Screech does, and he gets a great shot of Mr. Incredible struggling to lift the rock. Winston says, come on. Cut back to Mr. Incredible, still can't lift it. Everyone is watching Mr. Incredible trying to lift this rubble, including some people down the street watching everything on TVs in a store window. They turn around and see Mr. Incredible on the street behind him. Back to Winston and Evelyn. They can do it. Back to Mr. Incredible. He takes a breath, rubs his hands together, and takes one last shot at picking up the debris. He lifts it a little bit, but it's still not high enough. And then Mr. Incredible notices some people on his left and right, 15, all trying to help, inspired by Mr. Incredible. Mr. Incredible sees them, smiles, and then gets that little bit of extra strength necessary to move the debris and save the people. The helpers go in and help the trapped people. Winston and Evelyn are now switching between body cams, picking up different heroic moments and broadcasting them on every screen in the area. Everyone is watching the supers, and now some of the normal people save the city, which inspires everyone else to help too. Suddenly, the streets are filled with other helpers rescuing people, putting out fires. A few even take out some robots. I wrote the finale around this moment. I wanted to close up some threads, and there were some fun things I wanted to do along the way, but this scene is what matters. This is the movie. The best idea that Incredibles 2 presents, and never really does anything interesting with, is the idea of public perception. During his meeting with Bob, Helen, and Lucius, Winston tells the supers that he believes their big problem is perception. People only see the result of the heroics and rarely the heroics themselves, which gives supers a bad reputation. And as Helen saves the city, the supers' reputation gets better, but Incredibles 2 doesn't have anything interesting to say about that. It feels content with saying, Winston wants to make the supers look good by showing footage of them saving people, so he does, and they do. It isn't an important part of the third act, it's just an excuse to get and keep Winston involved in the story. I mean, the original Incredibles 2 works about the same without Winston. If Helen decides to save people to change public sentiment on her own, we hit all the same beats. She foils screenslaver plans, then the ambassador invites the supers onto her hydrofoil for the signing ceremony. The screenslaver turns out to be a businesswoman. There really isn't anything incredibly consequential that Winston brings to the table. So this is his moment to shine. One big mistake Incredibles 2 made is that it never acknowledged that Winston was right. The supers' big problem is perception. The medium of TV has been working against them. And if the supers can instead use media like TV to show people the good they do, not only will those people trust them, but they will also be inspired by them. And likewise, the supers will be inspired by the regular people. One of my favorite YouTubers, Jenny Nicholson, made this point in her Incredibles 2 video, but too many Brad Bird movies are about a special person or group of special people doing things that only special people can do. Only the supers can save the world. Only the rat born with a special sense of smell can be a chef. Only the special children from Tomorrowland can whatever the plot of Tomorrowland was. It's not a great message. And Jenny suggested some sort of Spider-Man 1-esque moment where the New Yorkers throw tire irons at the Green Goblin and say, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. And as corny as that is, I think you can and should work something like that into Incredibles 2. Not only is normal guy Winston helping by changing the public perception of supers, but the normal people themselves are helping the supers. This movie cannot end with supers being the only people that save the day. We need everyone to do it. And this changes the tide of the fight. Now our supers can focus on the robots and finally take a shot at the Underminer. Frozone helps the family clear a path through the remaining robots, and the Incredibles arrive to fight the Underminer. They all square off. Everyone works together. The Underminer does pretty well. It kind of seems like his mech suit has also been built to counter the Incredibles, which would make sense because he knows who they are and has probably fully expecting a showdown with them. And after a tussle, the Underminer is on top. He has the Incredibles essentially beat until we hear Jack Jack. And everyone turns and sees Jack Jack just sitting in the street. The Underminer is confused. A baby? And then a couple feet behind, we see Edna holding Jack Jack's remote. Helen gets worried. What are you doing? Get him out of here. Edna says, you worry too much, darling. Let's see what this baby can do. And at that moment, her remote also starts playing music. I think we use a song from The Magic Flute, one of Mozart's more exciting but less well-known songs. The tempo picks up and Jack Jack transforms into Demon Baby, because of course he should. The beginning of the movie demonstrates that Jack Jack has all these powers and Bob doesn't know what to do with them. Then, Edna demonstrates how to control Jack Jack. On the hydrofoil, the kids aren't really able to do it, and it's not until the very end, and really only once or twice, when Jack Jack becomes an asset, because of this new understanding of his powers and how to control them. So we are going to have that be the button. Jack Jack, as the Demon Baby, starts running at the Underminer. The Underminer tries to target Jack Jack, but then Jack Jack multiplies, turns into 5 Demon Babies that all go in different directions. They all leap onto different parts of the mech and start tearing it up. The rest of the family joins in, starts destroying the mech. Eventually, they knock it down. Every family member catches a different Jack Jack, and the 5th one lands in a big pile of snow. The end. They have inspired the people and beaten 2 villains that they had nothing to do with creating. All I'm saying is that I think if Incredibles 2 had a finale with more to say and do, Incredibles 2 could have been the groundbreaking, crowd-pleasing sequel that Incredibles 1 deserved. Before you go, there is a post-credits scene after these credits. I made it for this version of Incredibles 2, but it could really work with the original version too. Just a little thing that I think would have been fun at the end of the movie. But before that, I've got to thank my patrons, because you guys are the best. If you want to see your name up here, get access to videos early, other cool stuff, throw in literally any amount of money at patreon.com/NandoVMovies. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. And I've got to plug my podcast, Mostly Nitpicking. Every week, me and my co-host DJ pick apart a piece of pop culture by looking exclusively at the details. This week we're doing Spider-Verse, next week is Aquaman, week after that is Bumblebee, because all of the big winter releases need to come out within a week of each other. So you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We're at NitPickingPod on Twitter. And finally, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at NandoVMovies. It's where I post updates about videos and podcasts and little mini movie reviews like I did for Aquaman recently. So if you want to see that stuff, at NandoVMovies on Twitter. Now that we're done with that, a lot of time has passed since the first Incredibles. Post-credit scenes have become a staple of the superhero movie genre. So let's throw one in here, and let's use this scene to check back in on a character that could use a little closure. The Parrs are at home. Bob gives Jack Jack a cookie. Jack Jack's about to eat the cookie, but Bob says, nuh-uh. Jack Jack scowls and rolls his eyes. Then Jack Jack goes outside and offers the cookie to the raccoon that he traumatized earlier in the movie. The raccoon sniffs Jack Jack, takes the cookie, eats it, and then the raccoon looks at Jack Jack. Jack Jack gives the raccoon a look, and both Jack Jack and the raccoon look back at Bob. Bob is about to eat a cookie, but he stops. Bob looks at the remaining 6 cookies on the plate. Bob says, fine, you each get one more. Jack Jack immediately multiplies into 5 babies. Bob looks at the plate of cookies, says, whatever. Then one of the Jack Jacks winks at the raccoon winks back. The end.